And so they taught me to ask different questions. And that when you ask different questions, you get different answers. And because of understanding that approach, I was able to kind of take a step back. Because when I was at this crossroads in my life, my initial instinct was to ask, well, which way do I go? And to get really, really caught up with that question, do I do this or do I that? Do I do this or do that? And they reminded me that the question isn't really which way do I go? The question is really, where am I ultimately going? And once you clarify that, it becomes so much more clear, so much more quickly, which path you need to take to get there. Either it's path A, it's path B, maybe it's a path that you never even realized was open to you because you were so caught up in feeling like you just were magnified into this one crossroads in your life. And when you zoom out, you see that there is so much more available to you. So I took a step back. I literally locked myself in an apartment for a weekend, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I peeled back the layers and I asked myself that really exciting and also very scary question: what do I want my life to look like in 5 years? And when you're 25 and you're asking that, and 30 seems like a million years away, that's a big question. And I kept asking myself, not what are your hopes and dreams that you walk around with every day, and not just kind of like what do you think you want, but what do you really, really, really want that is so core to who you are that is going to remain true for the next half decade of your life in this really formative time of your growth personally and professionally. And by the end of that weekend, I had my vision for every aspect of my life for 5 years from that day. And it was incredibly inspiring. And I also realized that it was really hard to do alone. And in that moment, I recognized that I did not ever want anyone to have to go through that process alone. And I think one of the reasons why I recognize that is because oftentimes when I talk to people about visioning, it just feels so incredibly daunting. This idea of trying to figure out where you're headed when sometimes you can't even decide what you're having for lunch tomorrow, right? Like that just seems like a lot. And I also come across a lot of people who just tell me, I'm just not wired that way. I'm great at execution. I can make a strategic plan all day long. I can come up with my annual goals. I got that. But this sort of like visionary thing, like I'm not a visionary. And I want to tell you a secret. All of you are absolutely visionaries. The vision is in there. We just got to draw it out, right? So I also want you to know, if you are sitting here today feeling like, I get it, Lois, that's a great slide and everything, but I'm really not wired that way. It's a learned skill. Visioning is a muscle, and the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. So this is something where even if you feel like you've never done it before, you've never been able to quite get there before, you absolutely can, and you are going to leave here with more tools to do that. So if you are feeling like it's daunting or like this isn't the way that you're wired, of course you are in really good company. And when I say you're in really good company, it's because I've had the chance to go all over the world and talk with incredible people and really ask them about where they're at in their lives. And I have found that there's really 5 symptoms that rise to the top that are symptomatic of an unclear vision, of that hazy, murky vision. So I'm going to go through them. And what I want you to do is to make a note on your page when you hear the one that resonates most with you. And at the end, I'm going to get a show of hands and see which one resonates most in this room. So the first one is firefighting. Number 1 symptom of an unclear vision is firefighting. So if you feel like every single day you just wake up ready for that fight, and you wait for the barrage of notifications and texts and messages and things that you have to run in and do, and then you feel like, yeah, well, I put out one fire, and then it's like that whack-a-mole game where like you get one out and then 2 other pop up over here and then you're running over here. It also might be you if you are really good at firefighting. If everyone in your organization, everyone on your team, everyone in your family expects you to be the one to come in and save the day. And sometimes that's kind of where we end up staying, because even though it's not really serving us well, we know we can do it. We can figure it out. We can go in there and make it happen. And so oftentimes people kind of get stuck in that firefighting mode. Everything feels urgent. And if we take a step back, a lot of that is created urgency versus true urgency. But in the moment, when we're in firefighter mode, and that's how we describe ourselves to people, that becomes the narrative. And then you will always find the evidence to prove what you believe is true. And so if you feel like every time you're out with your friends, you're like, I'm always firefighting, you're always going to be firefighting. right? And so again, know that you are not alone if you feel like that. But if that's you, I want you to make a note on your page. And I saw some nodding, so I have a feel like I think we have some firefighters in the room. The next is misalignment. So we all know what it's like when everyone's rowing in the same direction. And we also know what it feels like when we're not. And this might be, again, with your team at work. It might be with your home team. There might be a lot of people on that ship with you that have different ideas about which way that ship should be headed. Or you might be that person that everyone's looking to tell them where they're headed, and you honestly don't know, right? And you're actually a little worried that they are looking to you, and what if you try to talk to them about the vision and it's not big enough, or they don't buy in, or they don't get excited, or they don't believe that they can get there. And so if you are feeling this misalignment personally or professionally in your relationships, whatever it might be, oftentimes, again, that is a symptom of this unclear vision. We're not able to sort of communicate where it is we're headed, and so no one really knows. And we don't really have the language to describe what it is we want to create. So when other people come at us talking about what they want to create or what they want to go, where they want to go, it's easy just to kind of get swayed, and all of a sudden you feel like you're being pulled in all these different directions. Number 3 is shoulding all over yourself. So if this is you, if you just should all over yourself, then I want you to make a note of that one on your page. And this is you if that internal dialogue is always saying, I should do this, and I should do that, and I shouldn't have to do that, and I should be able to do this. And it also might be you if you find yourself saying, I should be taking the next step, but I don't know what that next step is. And you might be one of those people who's always felt like you knew the next step. You go to a good school, then you go to the next thing, then you start your business, then it grows, then you have a family, and you kind of run on a roadmap, and you did everything you set out to do, and now you're wondering, what's next? And you don't know the answer to that question. So if you find yourself having that internal dialogue of shoulding all over yourself, then make a note of that one. Now, number 4, right? I feel like this is, yeah. All right, I think we have confirmation. I think we already know. I think we know. We're the squirrel. We're the adorable, cute little squirrel. So let me ask you this. A mentor of mine at Zingerman's always used to ask this question. He'd always say, when do squirrels get hit? Right? It's when they stop and they go the other way. When they second guess themselves, that is when they get hit. If they were just to keep going, they would make it to their side of the road. But if they're almost there, they second guess themselves, try to make it back, and that's it. And so if you are someone who second guesses yourself, if you are somebody who gets so excited about all the different things that you could be focused on, so what ends up happening is that your energy is really fragmented and you feel like you hear yourself saying, I'm just all over the place, or you're multi-passionate and there are so many things that you want to do, but you find yourself also saying things like, I'm really good at starting things, not so good at completing things, then you might be this adorable little squirrel friend that we have here today. The last one is a fear of specificity, and this fear of specificity shows up in 2 ways. The first way is people will say, what if I write the wrong vision? What if my vision is too big and I never get there? What if my vision is too small and I'm not thinking big enough, right? And they are so afraid to really clarify that and own that and put that down on paper that they just don't do it at all. And then you have your other people who say, I don't mind, writing something down, but I am that multi-passionate person. I don't want to be boxed in. I don't want to have a vision that's so rigid that I have to do this exact thing or else that's it, right? I want to be able to kind of go with the flow and see how things evolve. Now, the truth is that a vision is always going to open you up. It's never going to box you out, but a lot of people don't know that. And so it feels like getting clear on a vision would create these walls around them and would prevent them from opportunities that they don't even know about yet. So if you're somebody who feels like that fear of specificity is holding you back, if you're, one of my clients called it like a kinda person, if you're always like, I kind of want to do this and I kind of want to do that and I kind of want to explore that and I kind of want to think about that, then this might be you. So what I want to ask now is, who are my firefighters? Just raise your hand if I got some firefighters. Okay. Now what about my folks who are feeling misaligned? Okay, brave souls. Shoulding all over yourself. Yes. I think shiny object syndrome, it seemed like that was the crowd favorite. All right, and then fear of specificity. Okay, all right, so we have an interesting distribution in the room today. So the question then becomes, well, if those are the symptoms of having an unclear vision, what does it look like if you do have that clarity around your vision? And one of the things that stands out most to me over these 10 years of working with people and helping them gain that clarity is the power of your vision to really supercharge your resilience. And I can promise you that the people in this room, you have gotten to where you are now because of your tremendous resilience. But sometimes it feels like that resilience wavers. And sometimes it feels like we need something else to kind of steady us. And that's what a vision can do. And so one of my clients said, this is a verbatim phrase. Would you mind reading this out for us?
I had to show myself that I wasn't an imposter, that I was doing the work on a daily basis to get where I want to go, and that's the exact opposite of.
Beautiful. Has anyone felt like they've had imposter syndrome or mentored somebody who has imposter syndrome or had somebody on your team who struggles with that? So this client, she is now writing her second 5-year vision. She made her first 5-year vision a reality, and now she's writing her second. But she said that she started to go through that process directly because she had imposter syndrome. And she just wasn't willing to go another half decade feeling like that. And so to do that, she really had to clarify where she wanted to go, because then she could take the steps to start getting there. And again, if she's doing that every day, that is the exact opposite of being an imposter. Now, the next thing is a vision. It's not a dream. It's not an aspiration. It's not a check the box goal. A vision is a promise to your future self. I get goosebumps every time I say that, but a vision is a promise to your future self. And when you make that promise to your future self, you are staking that claim, right? And you are going to make that thing happen. And so for another incredible woman that I work with, she works with this huge franchise. She owns one of the franchises, and she had always been somebody who just worked and worked and worked. And part of her vision was having 4 unplugged vacations with her family, which when she wrote that in her vision seemed like an impossibility. But she knew, sorry, I keep hitting my, gotta stop being so emphatic. She knew that that was a promise that she was making to her future self. And so in year 2 of her 5-year vision, that started happening. And she was like, there's just no possible way it would have if I would have just let it be something I always wanted to happen. But once I made that promise to my future self, I staked that claim, I planted my flag, and I freaking made it happen. It is also your filter. I'm not gonna keep asking you to raise your hands. We've all had enough reps of the up and down today. But internally, I just want you to ask yourself if it's hard to say no sometimes. Again, at work, at home. Again, probably people really look to you for your guidance and your advice and your ability to make things happen. And you probably say yes a lot of the time. But as we all know, that's incredibly draining, right? And so we're not actually ending up serving people as much as we may want to, because we're fragmented in all these different ways. But a vision gives you this filter. It gives you a filter between what is an opportunity and what is a distraction disguised as an opportunity, right? Right? I know, right? Distraction disguised as an opportunity. And after today, you are going to start to see those so much more clearly. Something's going to come to you, and the more successful you become, the more of those opportunities come your way, and the more of those opportunities are actually just distractions, beautifully, beautifully disguised as opportunities. We also see this on our teams, right? An opportunity comes in, our whole team gets excited, and it takes a ton of discipline as a leader to say, guys, I know this looks great in the short term, but that is going to be sacrificing our long-term vision for a short-term gain, and we're not going to do it, right? That takes a ton of courage and discipline, but when you have a clear vision, again, you staked your claim. You know you can do it. It is also your life raft. Your vision is your life raft. I say it is like your compass and your shield. My vision is what made sure that I did not give up on my business. I used to live in San Diego before I met my amazing husband, who is the man I wrote about in my vision before I ever met him. He's here today. But before I ever met him, there was a point where I was sitting in my tiny apartment, and I was literally like, I don't know how I'm gonna keep doing this. And I was, beside myself. And within like 2 hours, I was just like, well, darn it, like I don't have a choice, because this is what I'm on the earth to do, and this is my vision, and so I'm gonna make it happen. And like it would be honestly way easier to give up. But like, I can't. Gotta keep going. But that was my life raft when things felt turbulent and when I felt like I wasn't sure how I was gonna make things work. And I, back in college, was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and now I'm 38, right? And having that vision has been one of those things that has helped me work through that and helped me make sure that I always prioritize mental health and reach out to the people I need when I need them, because part of my vision is not feeling like I have to go it alone, because I don't, right? So when things get tough, when things get turbulent, when you want to give up, your vision is that life raft to remind you this is where I'm headed. And even though it looks scary, even though it's dark and dreary, I'm going to figure out a way to make it happen. So let's take a step back, because vision has kind of become a buzzword. And a lot of times people will come to me and say they went to a breakfast like this and the speaker told them how important it was to have a vision, and then they never went further and they never actually described what a vision means or how to do it. And so they left being like, cool, I still know vision is important, still don't really know what that actually means. So I want to break that down today. So when I say the word vision, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Just shout it out. Future, what else? Purpose, planning. Okay, so future, purpose, planning, all these things immediately come to mind when we say this word. And oftentimes people also think of a vision statement, which oftentimes we'll see in a corporate setting, maybe a 1 or 2 sentence vision statement. Sometimes it's incredibly inspiring and powerful. Sometimes I feel like it's like magnetic poetry buzzwords that are like thrown on a thing, and then it's all like sounds great, and like maybe everyone knows it by heart, but like also maybe it doesn't help to drive decision making day to day. So when I talk about vision, I talk about it from a very different perspective, and it's what I call a deep dive vision. So when I say your deep dive vision, I mean your definition of success at a specific point in the future. So the first part, super important. It is your definition of success, not anyone else's. It is not society's definition of success. It is not social media's definition of success. It's not your family or friends or colleagues' definition of success. And really importantly, it may not be the definition of success that you used to have. I so often see people who are chasing and chasing and chasing this definition of success that was so relevant to their past selves, but they haven't had a chance to actually take a step back and validate, is that still my definition of success for this next chapter of my life? Or is that just what I feel like I'm supposed to want? Or everyone has said, it would be really convenient if this is what you would want, because then it would help all of us get where we needed to go too, right? So if you have ever felt like, sure, definition of success, but you've always thought about it in terms of everyone else or how you used to think about it, then I want you to really key into this idea that it's all about your definition. Now that takes us to this next piece, which is that specific point in the future. Now when I say specific, I mean a specific day of a specific month of a specific year. So my current 5-year vision is for May 24th, 2028. And I'm gonna get to that day of that month of that year. I'm gonna read my vision out loud, and it will be the reality that I've created around me. Not because of a magic pill or a silver bullet or any of this woo-woo stuff, right? I mean, I do kind of like woo-woo stuff, but not just because of that. But it's gonna be because I was, again, really intentional and proactive about making decisions that got me closer to instead of farther away from my definition of success. So the other thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is that I just talked about a 5-year vision, not a 20-year vision, not a 50-year vision. And I think one of the things that can feel so daunting is when people think, oh, I'm supposed to clarify my vision like for the rest of my life? How is that even possible? And I would argue that I don't know that it really is possible. So we're just talking about your definition of success for the next chapter of your life. And the beauty is, when I get to May 24th, 2028, it's gonna be time to celebrate. I mean, I'll celebrate all along the way, but it's gonna be time to take stock and then really recalibrate and think about the next age and stage, the next chapter of my life, and how my definition of success has evolved and changed and grown along with me. And then I'm gonna be able to sort of reorient myself towards that new definition of success without being beholden to my last definition of success or feeling like it has to be the definition of success forever and always. Now, the last thing I'll say about this is vision is like an accordion. You could stretch it out to that 5-year vision. You can condense it down to a 90-day vision. And some of the people in this room were at another session I did that was all about really thinking about a vision just for your day, or a vision for a project you have, or a vision for a really difficult conversation that you have to have. So you can take this concept of vision and you can extend it as far as you want, and you can bring it down as far as you want as well, but it's always that tool you have in your back pocket. So, all right, we've talked about what vision means, but I want you guys to be able to get a sense of what this actually looks like, what this document looks like. I should have brought mine today with me. I have it printed out. It's on my desk right now. But a vision is descriptive. Mine's a few pages long. It really is a narrative that describes the evidence that you have gotten to where you wanted to go. So if you read my vision, you feel like you are dropped into that life. You feel like it is already happening all around you. You can see it, smell it, touch it, taste it, feel it. And what you're doing with that is essentially creating a memory of the future, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but it is so powerful when we can truly feel ourselves, see ourselves, imagine ourselves in this future state. All the amazingness in our brain sort of works together to give us this sense that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's essentially already done in our mind. Now we're just kind of catching up to it. We can absolutely make it happen. And so then it creates this really strong tether between where you are now and where you're headed. Because again, in your mind, you've already been there. You've already gotten to experience it. Now you're just on the way. It is written in the present tense like it has already happened. So again, when we're talking about staking your claim and declaring this is my definition of success, when you write it like it has already happened, when you write something in your vision, when you say, man, I just got back from our 4th unplugged family vacation and it was amazing, and you write that and that is not your life today, but it's written like it is, that's when the acceleration starts to happen, because you just aren't willing to keep reading that sentence and having it not be a reality yet. So you just start to make it a reality so much more quickly than if you had always talked about it in the future tense. And it is multifaceted, right? Just like a diamond has all these amazing facets, they're all part of the same diamond. And so sometimes people will come to me and say, so do I have like a personal vision and then a separate professional vision, or how does that work? A vision is holistic, necessarily, right? A vision is about your personal growth, your professional growth, your financial growth. If spiritual growth resonates with you, it's about your spiritual growth, about your relationship growth, right? It's about all those facets of your life. And so when people really clarify their vision, again, instead of feeling like they're fragmented and pulled in all these different directions, they start to feel like everything is part of this unified whole, right? And so when you go through this process, it also helps you really remember that one part of our life, the professional growth part of our life, is really important for this next chapter of your life. And at the same time, the personal part and the relational part and the financial part and maybe the spiritual part, right? All of those are also valid. And you're allowed to really spend some time digging into what you want those areas of your life to look like too, instead of just thinking, well, I'll build my career and everything else will just kind of fit into that. It's really like, what's the whole life I'm building and how is my career going to fit into that? How is what I'm doing going to be a vehicle to get me to where I want to go? So I also want to talk about this concept of supercharging your why, because again, that whole idea of finding your why, thinking about your purpose, all that is really powerful, but sometimes can feel kind of like a buzzword, or like, what do we actually do with that if we are clear on our purpose or our why? How do we activate that? So when I think about mission and vision, again, I define them in ways that might be different than how you think about them in your organization or how you've thought about them in the past. And all the definitions in the room today are completely valid. This is just how I think about them. So when I think about mission, I think about something that's out there in front of us like a guiding star. It's aspirational. You're never going to get there. You never can get there. The point isn't actually to get there. And I know we have the amazing Bank of America in the room today. Back when I lived in Birmingham, Alabama, we had Regions Bank. And their mission was to make life better, which is amazing, right? You can't get really more altruistic than that. But it's not like one day, like the head of the bank and the SVPs and the head tellers are going to get together and say, like, guys, we did it. We've made life better. We are done. Close the bank. We made it happen. So that's not the point, right? We are always moving towards our mission. It's always going to pull us forward. But if we think back to those sailors who navigated by the North Star however many centuries ago, no matter how far they traveled, no matter how hard they worked, would they ever get even 1 inch closer to the actual star itself? No, it's impossible, right? So the idea is that it is incredibly important to really dig down and bring that why, that purpose to the surface. But if it's just kind of hanging out there on its own, it can be inspiring. But again, because we're never actually going to get there, it can be completely exhausting. Because again, while it always pulls you forward, it's like the horizon. No matter how far you travel, it's always going to be out there in front of you. You never are going to arrive. And so that is where our vision comes in, because we need a way and we deserve a way to feel successful at different points along our journey. So we've got that mission that's pulling us forward, and then we've got that specific destination that we are literally moving towards every single day. And then we actually get to arrive. And we get to feel what it feels like when that cumulative evidence that we have gotten to where we wanted to go is all around us. Now, we also got to talk about the plan, right? All this vision and mission stuff doesn't really matter if we never actually make it happen. And so when we think about our GPS, have you guys ever, gotten in your car, you have your destination put into your Google Maps, and then you hit traffic or a detour, or like me, you just don't know any of the streets in Norfolk even after being here for 3 years, and so you have to use your GPS to get everywhere, right? Has that ever happened to you guys? You get off course, but when you have your GPS, you just kind of feel like you have this confidence. Like, sure, it may take longer. I may have to take a different road. I may have to get a rental car or some help or have different people in the vehicle along with me. But been there.
You'll get there.
Yeah, you will get there, exactly. You got your trusty GPS. You're gonna get there. It's gonna be fine. And I freak out if my phone dies. I can't. I just stop, right? And that's what we do too, is sometimes we feel like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna keep going. Our internal GPS dies. The battery is gone. But we're like, I can't stop. Everyone else is going. Gotta keep going. Gotta keep moving. So you just keep going. And then the GPS finally comes back on. And now you're trying to look at your phone and the road and merge back into traffic. And then you're 20 minutes farther away from where you actually wanted to go. And so it's also a reminder that when your battery does die, it is worth the 5 extra minutes to charge it, proverbially, than just to keep going. Because then instead of keep going and going and going, but going in the wrong direction or just going in circles, you'll take that 5 minutes and then you'll get where you actually want to go so much more quickly and so much more effectively. Now, we have this plan in place, and when we look at all these pieces together, they create, again, this internal compass. And so when you have your vision, you kind of have this different sense of confidence, because you walk around with that same sense that, yeah, it's life. Of course things are going to happen. Of course things are going to derail me. Of course I'm going to get off track. Of course there's going to be unexpected detours and roadblocks and all the metaphors. But I still know where I'm going, and I'm going to figure out how to get there. The other thing is that, it's my last Google Maps analogy, but have you ever gone into Google Maps and you're in a new town and you say restaurant, right? What's Google Maps going to give you? List of restaurants near you. And of course now they have all those filters, but the first list that it gives you is just what Google thinks is most relevant. So Google is essentially projecting its definition of success onto you. And so really often in life, we're not really clear on our destination, and we go to a mentor for help, but we're not really able to describe our destination. And it's really hard for mentors to give us directions if they don't know where we're headed, right? They can give us the list of restaurants based on what they think is most relevant, right? They can give us those ideas about how we can grow in our career and in our lives. But if we're not able to really articulate where it is we want to go, they're only going to be able to go so far. If you are able to tell them, this is the kind of career that I want to create, this is the kind of life I want to carve out for myself, oh, okay, well then instead of just talking about what their definition of success and projecting it onto you, they get to say, in that case, let me help you get where you want to go. So if you are a mentor and you're finding that the person you're mentoring isn't really able to help, then that's such a great opportunity to really challenge and encourage them to clarify that vision. If you're a mentee, I'm going to challenge and encourage you to really clarify your vision, because your mentor is going to be able to help you so much more effectively if you can tell them where you're headed. And with that clarity comes speed. And this is not just speed for the sake of speed. This is not just speed for I want to get there faster and faster and faster. Of course, oftentimes a vision is recognizing, I want to slow down. I don't need to get there so fast after all. But the acceleration is, oh my gosh, these things are starting to become part of my life so much more quickly than I ever could have imagined. And again, it's because of all those things we've talked about coming together. So how does vision play into our decisions? So we have a ton of decisions. I don't know if you guys have heard the term decision fatigue, but we all have it. By the end of the day, we have made so many decisions, personal and professional and financial and in our relationships and all of the things, that we're just exhausted. So our vision needs to act as a decision-making tool for us. It's gotta help us make better decisions faster, but not just better decisions faster for somebody else, like what better and faster means to us. So ultimately, this comes down to proactive decision-making versus reactive decision-making. And there was a social scientist back in the 50s and 60s named Ron Lippitt, and he studied all different kinds of organizations, and he found that there was really two schools of thought when it came to decision-making. The first is what he called traditional problem solving. And in that dynamic, everyone got in a room and said, what's the problem and what's the solution? What's the problem and what's the solution? And if your only questions are what's the problem and what's the solution, your only answer can be about the how, right? But as we know from all we talked about, the how sort of needs to come last. Otherwise, you're just kind of charting your course without determining the destination first. So in these scenarios, in this dynamic, people just came up with kind of those Band-Aid solutions, right? That traditional problem just kind of kept them doing the same old thing again and again and again. They were just slapping on Band-Aids instead of getting down to the root cause. And then he studied other groups that did what he called preferred futuring, what we're calling visioning today. And these groups said, absolutely there are problems, and of course we need to come up with solutions, but at this point in the process, we have got to let go of the how. We've just got to let it go. And he said it was like shackles being taken off. The energy in these rooms just kept going up and up and up, and the out-of-the-box ideas started flowing, and people became so much more open and honest and candid with each other because they weren't held back by just jumping straight to the how and getting buried in those weeds. And ultimately what this does is this really key visionary perspective shift. When we come from this place of visioning, preferred futuring, we are asking the question, not just how do we move away from what we don't want, but how do we move towards what we do want? And so I really want you to take that back to your families, to your friends, to your organizations, and notice how many times when we get incredible people in a room together and we start to try to make a decision, the conversation is all about, well, we don't want this and we don't want that, and we're scared that's gonna happen, we don't wanna take this risk, and it's all about trying to move away from that, instead of asking, guys, I get that, and we'll figure all that out, but what are we actually moving towards? And when you can take that proactive stance, when you can be that visionary leader, people are gonna notice and they're gonna start to follow. So as we kind of move into the nitty-gritty of, all right, how do you actually make this thing happen? I wanna share with you guys the 4 elements of an effective vision. What are the ingredients that make up a really, really solid vision? The first is that it has got to get you out of bed in the morning. It has got to be exhilarating, right? It's got to be something that really pulls you forward, that gives you butterflies in your stomach when you read it, that when you are reading it out loud, when you are reading out loud to yourself or sharing it with somebody else, you are like, ooh, yes, this is where I'm headed, right? You want to kind of be able to like have that grin on your face that you can't take off. Your cheeks are hurting so much because you've been smiling as you've been thinking about this vision. You've also got to believe you can get there, even if you don't know how yet. You've got to believe you can get there, even if you don't know how yet. And this is, when I say you've got to believe you can get there, this is in your heart of hearts, in the core of your soul. No one else can answer this question for you. In the core of your being, do you believe you can get there? If the answer is yes, keep it in your vision, right? If the answer is I don't know, that's okay. We can figure that out. We can add some intentional vagueness to your vision. We can release the pressure gauge on that. But ultimately, I always say to people, I will help you write a vision. I'm not going to help you write a fantasy. Your vision has got to be at the intersection of inspiring and strategically sound. Because when you truly believe you can get there, even if you have no clue how, then again, you're staking that claim. You know you are gonna make it happen. You have that internal confidence, you've got that fire, you've got that excitement, and you're like, I am gonna have to share this vision to get the help and support to get there, because I know I won't be able to do it by myself. And that's okay, because that's one of the other elements. But before we share it, we gotta write it down. It's got to be documented. And so many people that I talk to, they have all these incredible ideas swirling around in their head, but there's so many ideas that it kind of feels like their head is about to explode because there's so many thoughts and so many possibilities and so many options swirling around in there. They just haven't had a chance to get them all out and filter them and see what really is most important and what's just noise. And so when we document our vision, it really challenges us to explore it and articulate it and distill it down. And then, of course, that's how it becomes your life raft. Because when things are scary and when you're not sure, you come back and you read those lines in black and white and you remember, this is where I'm headed and I made that promise to my future self. When you write it down, it also keeps you really, really honest with yourself. And I have to say, I got really close to marrying a different guy than that amazing guy over there. And I didn't because I wrote about the non-negotiables for my partner in my vision. And I really just wanted to be normal and get married at 30 and just like make it work and be done and live in a house. And every day I just kept being like, I can't pretend that this is the guy because I'm reading it right here and this is not, those non-negotiables are not in place. And so it, obviously, right, that was so hard to make that decision. It would have been way easier to go path of least resistance and just do kind of the societal thing. I was just like, can't do it. It's on page 2, gotta leave. So we've also got to share, yes. And I did read my entire vision to Tyler like on date number 2. So he knew where I was headed and he had the chance to come with me or not. So it also, like I said, has got to be shared. Some people, when I say this, they're like, oh, that's so funny. You want me to share this thing? Yeah, it's not gonna happen. Like this is so intimate. This is the life I'm creating. I'm not gonna share this with anybody. The beauty is, you don't have to share the whole thing with everybody. Share parts of it with people. You share the whole thing with some other people. We figured that out in your sharing plan. But the idea is that when you share it, every time you get it out there, the secret is that sharing your vision isn't about receiving it, right? It's not about the person receiving it because we're not asking for permission. We're not asking for validation. We're just getting it out there. So the act of sharing is where that power comes in. The act of sharing is what unlocks that synchronicity and starts to draw those people and those opportunities and those experiences to us that are going to help us get where we ultimately want to go. So I always say, I don't know anything about sports, but they have that whole like score early, score often. And I always say, share early, share often. So you share your vision initially with the people that you want. And then as you continue to meet people, mentors, colleagues, people that you meet at events like this, and you really connect, right? That's an opportunity to say, I'd love to share my vision with you and see what resonates, right? So now, how do you actually make this thing happen? We're going to wrap up today talking about how you actually make this vision a reality. And what it comes down to is knowing what it takes to create sustainable change. Because you can have a vision that's really exciting, and day 1, you're feeling good. But what happens on day 5? And what happens on week 7? And what happens in month 22, right? So what I want to introduce you to is the formula for change. And this formula was developed decades ago in the field of organizational dynamics, but it applies to every aspect of our lives. And ultimately, it comes down to change versus resistance. So if you think of like a seesaw, we've got change on one side and we've got resistance on the other side. And the question is, how do we tip the scales in favor of change? And there's 3 variables that tip those scales. We've got D, V, and F. Now, D stands for dissatisfaction. So raise your hand if dissatisfaction sounds negative to you. Yeah, dissatisfaction. Are you satisfied or dissatisfied? Sure. But raise your hand if there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. I hope, right? That's healthy. Any elite athlete has a gap between where they are and where they want to be. Any rising business star has a gap between where they are and where they want to be, right? That gap is so necessary. It is so healthy. We have to have a big enough gap between where we are and where we want to be to put in the time and the effort and the energy and the resources it takes to create the change. If we don't have that gap, it's not worth it. The next is vision, of course, right? Our definition of success at that specific point in the future. And then F is our first steps of action, how we are actually going to get there. So when we put it all together, we can see that change, real, lasting, sustainable change can take hold when dissatisfaction multiplied by vision, multiplied by first steps of action are all greater than the natural resistance to change. But what happens if any of those variables is 0, right? We multiply them all together, so if you multiply anything by a 0, what do you get? 0, right? So oftentimes people will say, yeah, there's a gap between where I am and where I want to be. And I'm really good at making stuff happen, but I don't have that vision to sort of pull it all together. I don't actually know what it is that I'm working towards. I don't know what I really, really want for this next stage of my life, right? Or sometimes one of the other variables will be missing. But I wanted to show you guys this because the visioning process, the way that you actually go ahead and clarify your vision, maps directly to this equation. So you go into that process. You know you're ready to clarify your vision when you are ready to make that change, when there is a compelling reason to make a change in your life now instead of 6 months from now, right? 2024 is coming. For some people, that's a really compelling reason for change, but it's got to be more than that. We don't want to fall into the New Year's resolution crowd, right? So it's got to be more than just a new year is turning over. What's that compelling reason for you right now that you want to make a change in your life, right? What is that compelling reason that's going to make it worth it for all that time and energy and effort and resources that it's going to take? Then there's that dissatisfaction. We don't really know how big the gap is between where we are and where we want to be until we really know where we are, and we also really know where we want to be, right? Last thing about Google Maps, when you pull it up, it says, where are you going? And even if you put in an exact destination, if you can't tell Google where you are now, it can't help. And so often we skip that step of taking stock and being really honest with ourselves about where we are now, getting a true lens on the current reality. So the visioning process helps us really understand where we are now. Then it helps us clarify where we are headed, and only then do you actually have a sense of how big that gap is. And the good news is it's oftentimes bigger than we thought in the best way possible, because then you're that much more compelled to narrow it. Then it gives us a vision. If that was zeroing things out, no more. We've got a vision to slot into that space. And then you work backwards from that vision to create the plan, the roadmap to get there. You've got your benchmarks, you've got your milestones, you've got your recalibration process all along the way. So now you don't just have any first steps. You don't just have a to-do list where you don't know if those actions on your to-do list are actually getting you closer to where you want to go. You know that the steps that you are taking are in direct alignment with the vision that you have for the future you're creating for yourself. And then we think back to that research about the proactive and reactive decision making. Going through this type of process does this amazing thing where it naturally reduces the resistance we have to change. Because even if we're the ones who have that compelling reason for change and we want to make that change, we're human. We will always have some of that resistance. But going through this process really helps us tip the scales. So the beauty and the thing that I want to leave you guys with today is that you have the power to impact each and every one of these variables. You have the power to impact the change, that compelling reason. You have the ability to impact that gap between where you are and where you want to be and how to narrow it. You can impact your vision by really gaining clarity, and you can have those first steps of action in place when you create the roadmap to get there, right? And then you are now surrounded by people in this room who speak the same language as you and can help you reduce that resistance. We talked about lifting each other up. We talked about all that this morning. And as you walk out of here today and you take these nuggets and these ideas, the ones of you who really go and do this work, I want you guys to make sure that you're helping each other reduce that resistance, knowing that, like, hey, I'm in this too. I'm doing this work too. It is hard, but it is worth it.